dreary Friday night here in the Boston area. So we will bring the light. We will bring the light and the warmth. And we're so fortunate to have the gift of Shabbat to enter into when things are pretty dreary outside or in our world. We can bring light and love and warmth of our tradition. We can draw it out. We can bring it to one another. I wanted to point out before we get started that today is one of the first days of a new Jewish month called Adar. And Adar is, this year, has two. There are 2 months of Adar. And if you read my Shabbat message, you already know this, or you might already have known it. We are in a year that, believe it or not, is called a pregnant year, a Shana Me'uberet. And it's really, we translate it as a leap year, but it means a pregnant year. And it means that there's 2 of 1 month, the month of Adar. And we do that because the Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar, and we need to keep it lined up with the solar calendar because there's about an 11-day difference between the two. And so to keep the holidays in the right seasons, we add an extra month. But the important thing about Adar is that Adar is associated with a particular emotion, and that is joy. Misha nichnas Adar marbin besimcha, it says in the Talmud, when Adar enters, joy increases. So we get a double portion of joy this year, which we get whenever it's a leap year or a pregnant year. So especially on a day that is so gray, sleeting, raining, just gross outside in our area. Some of you are coming from better climes. It's interesting to think about joy. And I can tell you that seeing the faces on the screen and knowing that nothing has stopped us. This pandemic has not stopped us from being a Kehillah Kedosha, a community rooted in holiness and in making meaning together and drawing forth the meaning of our tradition. So as we enter into Shabbat, I'd like to invite you to take some beautiful, deep breaths and let go of your week. Let go of anything that you need to release tonight to enter into this sacred time. What a gift this time is. So much of our liturgy on Shabbat is just praise for Shabbat, being so grateful that we have this time outside of time. So just let go of whatever it is, roll your shoulders back, make space in your heart space, your lung space for a deep breath to come in and for the peace of Shabbat to enter into you. We will bring Shabbat into our space by lighting Shabbat candles. If you have them at home nearby and want to bring your light into the Zoom square and share it, that would be beautiful. Our candle blessings are on page 2. Our techie behind the scenes is Alex tonight. He shared the digital prayer book, and I think, Alex, if you can pop it into the chat again for those who've just joined us after the first time you put it in, that would be great. So you can follow along at home if you'd like in the book. And we'll be on page 2 for candle lighting. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom. We'll turn to page 24 for Shalom Aleichem, welcoming the angels, the messengers of peace, reminding ourselves that that is exactly what we can be for one another. We can be messengers for one another, messengers of peace and love and kindness. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Mi melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seitchem leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're going to share words on the screen for Ana B'Koach, which is a beautiful prayer. It's traditional to sing just before Lecha Dodi on Friday nights. We ask that God untie our tangles. I'm guessing that we all here have tangles of one kind or another. Maybe muscles are tense in one part of your body. Maybe you feel tangled in your heart or in your mind about some particular thing. Maybe you have worries. Tonight we let go. As the saying goes, it doesn't come from Jewish tradition, but you've probably heard the saying, let go and let God. So that's what I feel like Ana B'Koach is telling us, or we are reminding ourselves that we don't need to do it all. We don't need to be everything for ourselves and everyone. We are held by a power, by mystery, by an infinite source of love and life, and let's just let go into that feeling of being held and connected. Ana B'Koach, B'Koach, Gedulat Yemincha, Yemincha, Tatzir Tzerura, Kabel Rinatzamcha, Sagveinu, Torenu, Nora. Ana B'Koach, B'Koach, Gedulat Yemincha, Yemincha, Tatzir Tzerura, Kabel Rinatzamcha, Sagveinu, Torenu, Nora. We'll go into Lecha Dodi, welcoming our Shabbat queen or bride, saying, come, my beloved, let us greet the beautiful presence of Shabbat, which to me contains a deep teaching within it. The fact that we say, come, my friend, together let's greet Shabbat, gives us a sense of the importance of welcoming in this time and entering into this time, not alone, but with others in community, as we are so stubbornly doing, no matter what the conditions outside, whether the weather, the pandemic, we insist on greeting Shabbat together. We'll turn to pages 20 and 21, verses 1, 2, 5, and 9. And it's our custom to rise as we're able for verse 9 and to symbolically bow towards the entrance of our homes to welcome in that presence of peace and love and connection. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Tnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, tene Shabbat nekabela. Shamor וזכור בדיבור אחד, ישמיענו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת ולתהילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי מקור הברכה, מראש מקדם נצוחה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Verse 5. התעוררי, כי באורך קומי אורי, שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה.
We transition to page 28 and turn to the Baruch Hu, the call to worship. This next section of our service is known as the Shema and Its Blessings. And at the heart of it is the Shema, the central credo of the Jewish people that God is one. But we build up to it, first with the Baruch Hu, then with a recognition of God's presence in the natural world, and giving thanks to the way that God transmits God's love to us through Torah and mitzvot. And finally, bringing those together in the way that we express our love through God and v'ahavta. And finally, expressing our awe at the way that God can transcend the natural world and his redemption and God's redemption of the Jewish people with Micha Mocha. We turn to page 28 for the Baruch Hu, and we're welcome to rise in body or spirit and to unmute as we join together in the call to worship. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. You're welcome to be seated. We give thanks to the God of creation for all the ways that the divine shows up in the natural world, bringing beauty and awe and inspiration into our lives. And we join together for the Chatimah, the seal of this blessing at the bottom of page 30. Uma'avir yom u'mevi laila, um'avdil ben yom u'ben laila, Adonai tzvaot shemo, el chai v'kayam, tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed, baruch atah Adonai, Amariv Aravim. You may be familiar with the concept of love languages, that humans have 5 different love languages and how we express and give our love, receive love through gifts, through human touch, through words of affirmation and acts of service. I think God's love language is Torah and mitzvot, and that's what's encapsulated in this blessing, Ahavat Olam. God expressed God's love to us by giving us Torah, by giving us ways of living in the world. And it's our job to receive them and interpret them and enact them in our lives. We join together at the bottom of the page. Ki hem chayinu ve'orech yameinu ve'hem negei yomam v'layla ve'avarcha al tasir mimenu li'olamim baruch ata Adonai ohev amo Yisrael. We turn to page 34 and we join together for the Shema. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed V'avata et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha v'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta ba'am v'shiftecha v'veitecha uvlechtecha v'aderech v'shochbecha uvkumecha Ukshartam leot al yadecha, v'hayu letotafot bein einecha, uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha, leman tiskeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai, v'item kedoshim lelohechem, ani Adonai Elohechem, asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, v'hiot lachem Elohim, Ani Adonai Elohechem, Adonai Elohechem Emet.
We'll turn now to our blessing for redemption, or really our recollection of redemption that we sing every Shabbat and that we say every day. Our Yetziat Mitzrayim, our exodus from Egypt, is always present for us. And I believe that's because we can all in our own ways experience that feeling of crossing over from restriction and constriction into freedom in ways large and small. Our tradition asks us to get in touch with that feeling. It's a very important part of our journey as human beings, that sometimes we feel stuck, sometimes we feel free as individuals and as people. Sometimes we truly are stuck and sometimes we truly are liberated. So with that kavanah, that intention of what freedom feels like for us, we sing Micha Mocha, page 40. Micha Mocha b'ayim Adonai, Micha Mocha nehedar b'kodesh, Nora tehilot, O Seifele, Nora tehilot, O Seifele, Malchutecha, Rauvanecha, Bokeyayam, Lifne Moshe u'Miriam, Ze'eli anu, Ve'ameru Adonai, Yimloch, Leolam vaed, yai da 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 yai da 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 yai da da yai da 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 On page 42, we pray that God grant us that we lie down in peace and raise us up to life renewed, and that the shelter of God's peace will be spread over us. We'll sing the third line down, Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. God, please spread over us the shelter of your peace.
remembering that if we each do our part to provide a shelter of peace in some small way to another human being, then we are acting as God's partner in this world in creating a Sukkot Shalom, canopy of peace over all the world. We'll sing that third line down and then the end of the blessing on page 42. Ufroz aleinu sukat shelomecha ufroz aleinu sukat shelomecha Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim.
It's traditional in the evening when we recite the Amidah to do so silently. And tonight we're going to create the space for us to recite our own Amidah, whether we're using the words in the prayer book or the words in our heart. There is a tradition that we whisper when we say this prayer, that it's not completely silent and it's also not completely out loud. And of the many names for the Amidah, from Ha-Tefillah, the central prayer, to Amidah, the standing prayer, I like to consider it the whispering prayer, because whispering brings with it that sense of intimacy, of personal connection that we can feel with the divine in this moment. We turn together to page 46, and we rise in body or spirit. I'll recite the first line, the opening line of the Amidah, and then invite us to continue on our own. And we'll come back together at the end for Oseh Shalom, our prayer for peace. Adonai sivatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise.
Oseh Shalom Mimroma, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru Amin. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
Take this opportunity as we gather as a community this evening to think of our friends and loved ones who are in need of healing of body and mind and spirit. And if you're thinking of somebody, a friend, a community member, a loved one who's in need of a prayer for healing and you'd like to share their name with us, please take a moment tonight to type them into the chat so that we can read them out loud for everybody. Agnes Bales, Liesel, Alan, Susan, Jerry, Bruce, Steve Fromm and John Tovrov, John Symington, John and James Callan, Steve Adler Golden. Please continue to share names in the chat. As a community, we pray for Dahlia Bat Miriam, Asher Danielle Ben Leah, Honey Sachs, Chana Bat Moshe, Dina Rachel Bat Aryeh and Vigalia, Cassandra Warshawski, Chaya Blima Bat Chaim Chia, Vasilia Ruchel, Jeffrey Colt, Joseph Siegel, Yosef Ben Herschel Beirut, Glenna Bub, and Ruth Palumbo. We join together for the Misha Beirach, our prayer for healing on page 253.
Misha Beirach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Misha Beirach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha La'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen. We'll turn now to Aleinu on page 282. Please rise as you are able. Aleinu leshabeach la'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר הארץ, ומושב עיקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגופי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. Page 287. והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. At this time, as we move to the conclusion of our service, we remember those who have died at this time in years past, or who have recently passed from this world. Those we are remembering. For those of you who are in a period of mourning, reciting Kaddish or who are observing a yahrzeit would like to share name or names of those you are remembering, please feel free to share in the chat. I do especially want to mention our member, one of our members who is remembering her mother today, this Shabbat. Glenda Anderson, mother of Esther Neshama, is being remembered with much love this evening. So we have other names of those being remembered. Palma's sister, Lucille McGowan, David Grossman, Janine Morgan, David Perlman, Fred Rowe. I want to also mention that today, February 4th, was the birthday of Peter Feldman, so beloved to Doris and Saul and Hedi and Valerie and their family, and so beloved to our community. And so a special note that though it is not his yahrzeit tonight, it was his birthday today, and we think of him with love. Also remembers tonight is Nat Levine, Curtis Pearl, Lou Sparrow, and other names that you can see on your screen from our community. We will say Mourner's Kaddish on page 294. If you are reciting Kaddish, please rise. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shema Rabbah v'alma divra chirute v'amlich malchute v'chayechon uvyomechon ובחיי תכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו, לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום ממרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו Amen.
I want to share a few brief announcements. It's wonderful to see so many people here for our Ben Adler Health Talk. And I don't want to delay us any further, but I want you to know that tomorrow at 10:30, I'll be leading Torah study on Zoom, and I hope you'll be back to do some learning for this week's Torah portion, Truma. And next Thursday at 9 o'clock, Rabbi Berkman is teaching her class, Torah for the Heart and Mind. That's 9 a.m. on Zoom. And next Thursday, we are blessed with another guest speaker. Next Friday, February 11th. We're going to hear stories of belonging. And February is Jewish Disability Inclusion Awareness Month. And we will have two Jewish disability inclusion leaders, Shelley Christensen and Gabrielle Kaplan-Meyer, share their stories of moms of autistic children and why belonging is the key to a more diverse and rich Jewish community, and how we can apply the lessons of the last 2 years. And there'll be some time for a Q&A. And I also want to mention that we have an exciting social action initiative. We are partnering with Brother and Sisters Cafe to stock their community fridge with dairy and vegetables for people in the community who need extra food and assistance, and they can stop by the fridge and just pick up whatever they need. And on the first Tuesday of every month for the next 4 months, we have some parents from our Anson Religious School who are going to be at the synagogue from 5:30 to 6, collecting dairy products and veggies, taking it, stocking the fridge. If you have questions, you can reach out to me, but the first pickup will be this Tuesday, beginning at 5:30.
So before we move into our main event for the night, our very special event, hearing from Dr. Sharon Levine and welcoming members of the Adler family, I want to close our service with words that come from this Shabbat's Torah portion, Truma. And I love when this Torah portion comes around, because then it really makes sense to sing this. These words mean, and build me a sanctuary so that I may dwell among you. Build me a sanctuary. These are the words of God through Moses, which were put to a song that was based on this, or we sing this, the Hebrew words, and then this song based on this idea from the Christian tradition that is so beautiful, and such a beautiful rendering of these words, to prepare me to be a sanctuary. We each can be a place where the holy can dwell. And that is the idea behind these words, V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. So sing it with me if you can, if you wish. V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. O Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. And in thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Vasuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. Vasuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham.
Thank you, Rabbi Berkman. Thank you to the Adler family for being here tonight, and thank you to our brotherhood for continuing to keep Ben's memory alive and by organizing these talks. And a special thank you to Spence Gould for all that you've done to make this year's talk possible. And it's my pleasure to introduce Spence. We'll say a few words about Ben and tonight's talk.
Good evening, everybody, and Shabbat Shalom. Brotherhood is so pleased to sponsor tonight's Ben Adler Health Talk. And honestly, it is such an honor for me to represent both Brotherhood and remembering this wonderful, good old friend of ours who was so central to many things happening in our synagogue. Ben was a longtime member of devoted service to TOS. He served on the board of trustees. He was a regular Friday night and Saturday morning Shabbatnik, is what we called people who attended both of those services. He was a daily worship service leader in the days that we had a morning and an evening service every single day of the week, led by lay people. And of course, Brotherhood past president. Ben was a social worker from Belmont with a passion for men's health issues. And after he passed, Ben's son, Lee, and his two brothers, Bart and Richard, endowed a memorial fund devoted to health presentations for our community in his memory. We've had at least one each year since then. And I'd like to take a moment right now to introduce members of his family who are here. They include Ben's son, Lee Adler, cousin and our congregant, Lois Platt, and brother, Bart Adler, and his wife, Susan. Bart, if you can unmute and please speak right now.
On behalf of the Adler family, I want to express our deep appreciation to the Temple Ohabei Shalom community and to our beloved and valued connection, Spence Gould. for keeping Ben's memory and mission alive. There is no greater tribute to a man. Ben would be grateful and humbled, as are we. Be safe, be well, and Shabbat Shalom.
And lastly, thank you, Bart, for those kind words. And you are so right about remembering Ben. Also, thank you to the whole Adler family for this wonderful brainchild that you all came up with and started and endowed in the beginning, to which every year when brothers send in their dues, they also add continuing to that principle, so we can continue to produce these wonderful programs. Thank you to Sharon, Congregant Sharon Levine, for sharing your expertise, your warmth, your sensitivity, and your Menschlichkeit with your community here. And of course, thanks Larry Green, who envisioned tonight's presentation with this specific speaker. Thank you, everybody. Good job, and let's continue with the program.
Thank you so much, Spence, and thank you for those beautiful words about Ben, and so meaningful to have members of Ben's family here. And I'm sorry I didn't have the honor of knowing Ben, but I love that his legacy is continuing on in our community. So I wanted to share a few words of introduction of Dr. Sharon Levine. Dr. Levine is section head for geriatrics in the Division of Palliative Care and General Medicine at Massachusetts General Hospital. She's a nationally known expert in geriatrics education, teaching, and clinical care. She's focused her clinical, scholarly, educational, and leadership efforts on innovative approaches to collaborative care of the elderly. It is her mission to geriatricize healthcare, to inspire and train non-geriatricians and their institutions, and to provide care to older patients in informed and effective ways. She has designed, evaluated, and disseminated novel curricula and national guidelines for students, residents, chief residents, fellows, faculty, and primary care clinicians. She's a member of the board of directors of the American Geriatric Society, a current member and past chair of the American Board of Internal Medicine's Geriatric Medicine Specialty Board, served as a trustee of the American Board of Internal Medicine Foundation, and a recipient of the Dennis W. Janigan Education Award from the AGS. So we are so proud to claim Sharon as our congregant, and so pleased that she has agreed to share her wisdom with us tonight. Over to you, Sharon.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, let me put it on my full. Can everybody hear me okay? Say thumbs up, yes, thumbs down, no. I know I'm dealing with some people entering elderhood here, including me. So I really want to thank the Temple Ohabei Shalom Brotherhood for inviting me to give this Ben Adler Memorial Health Initiative talk. It's really very meaningful to me, and thank you so much, and thank you to the Adler family for supporting this. I think it's really wonderful. I remember last year's talk with Rochelle Walensky. It seems like just a minute ago, but here we are. Another year has gone around. So I'm going to get started talking about navigating elderhood, and doing that by what matters to you. So a lot of people don't know me in another way. They don't know me as a geriatrician. I've been a geriatrician for almost 35 years, and geriatricians care for older adults. They're internists who take care of disease, but also preserve function and help people age well. But I am also married to this man who you see on the bima every single Friday night with his guitar, Andy O'Connell. And here he is in Israel and Caesarea and overlooking Tel Aviv at night for a Shabbat service. And I am the lucky person who can say I am married to the most wonderful, kind, smart, talented person that I know. And I've never called myself Mrs. Andrew O'Connell in my entire life, but tonight for you guys, I will. So I'm going to start this by having you do something in the chat, okay? I think most of you know how to use the chat, and I want you, but I'm going to do it in a certain way. I want you to think about what are great things, delicious things about getting older, or about older adults if you don't consider yourself older yet. And I want you to write it in the chat, but I don't want you to hit send. I want you all to do it. And then when I say I'm going to run the chat, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to think about what are great things about getting older or older adult, becoming an older adult, okay? And I want you to put it in the chat, but don't hit send. And then I'll tell you when. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to do that. I don't want long sentences. You know, you can say delicious, wise, whatever you want, but I don't want a long tome. Okay, I'm going to give you about another 10 seconds.
Well, then I have no use of I want you to write, I have no use.
Oh, okay.
Damn it.
How about if I put it in for you? You want me to put it in? Or somebody else put it in? Okay. All right. I want you all now to hit enter so it comes down. Enjoying grandchildren, rich life experiences, wisdom, sharing experience, discounts. Judy, fun. Wow. Okay. So there are some great things about getting older. Okay. Now let's go to the respect from younger people. Delicious with family. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to go to the next slide. Oops. What's hard about getting older or dealing with older adults? Take a minute to think about it. Don't hit send. Just put it in the chat. And when I tell you, hit it. Okay, but not yet. I'm going to give you another 10 seconds, okay? I love that perspective. Time to reflect. Okay, now it's time to hit send. Falling, illness, less time, memory loss, hearing and diminished, decreased mobility, patience, lack of it or more, health, sense of limited time. Well, I think you just gave my talk. So these are the things we're gonna talk about. And this is why I love being a geriatrician, honestly. So today, what I'd like to do is provide a framework for thinking about aging and health, to talk about how you can maintain and maximize your independence, to think about what matters most to you in life, in your health, in every way. And then to have you think about what it's like to prepare for making decisions about your health based on what matters to you. And then to use that to plan for getting older and to talk with the people who matter most so that they know your wishes. So that's what I'm going to try and do tonight. So these are trajectories of aging. So if you look up here in the green spot, this is when you're good, right? You're good, you're robust, you're skiing, you don't have to think about you're going to die when you walk outdoors on a day like this. This is when you can go play tennis. And if we all have a sell-by date. And, when you come to the edge of that square, if you've got successful aging, you've had a slope that goes down, and then you may become a little frail at the end. There are people who have accelerated aging, and the slope is a little bit steeper, and it dips down, and it can dip down because maybe you had some heart trouble, you have lung trouble, you got knobby knees, and it's hard for you to get around, or you have cancer, but you can get better and come back up into that green zone, and then you go down again. And frailty is something that is sort of built in with aging, and sarcopenia is sort of loss of the muscle mass and things that allow us to be strong and do a lot of the things that we do. And by the end, there's disability and loss of independence for some, but certainly not for all. There are many people who just go down there and fall off that cliff, And most of us muddle through the rest. And the temple, what I'm saying in other words, is the temple starts to crack. And even our beautiful Western Wall temple starts to crack and needs to be held together with whatever we hold it together with. Maybe we hold it together with all the little pieces of paper that we stick in every little crack that's in our temple that starts to crack. But the temple starts to crack, and no one lives forever. I'm showing you a picture now, and every picture that I'll show you that I say is one of my patients, I've gotten permission from people to use these. And this was my patient, Martha Dunn, who is the oldest patient I ever took care of. This was her 110th birthday party, and she lived to 117, and I also took care of her 98-year-old son. So that tells you how, look at that, not a wrinkle on her face. That's sort of shocking, isn't it? And she had memory problems, and she had some knobby knees, but she went to the adult day care center every day and had communion with people that she really loved. So I'm going to try and frame this in a way that I think really makes sense and is something that was put together and sponsored by the John A. Hartford Foundation with collaboration from the Institute for Healthcare Improvement right here in Boston. And it's a way of framing what happens with people as they get older. And that's thinking about this as the 4 M's. And the 4 M's are, and I put what matters at the top, because I do think it's the most important one. And it's about aligning how you want to live your life, where you want to live, whether it's at home or whether you're at the end of your life, aligning it with your values and the things that you want for your own health and medical care. That's the first M. The second M is medication. Medication has an effect on lots of other things. Medication has effect on your ability to think. Medication can have effect on your mobility if it makes you sleepy or tired. And it really is very important when people take medications that really affect the way that we think. Also, it links to what matters because, when you're a 45-year-old diabetic, you may be really gung-ho about wanting to have very, very, very strict control of your diabetes. But when you get to be 85, you might not care so much, unless it makes you pee a lot. You might not care. So what you cared about at 45, you may not care about, and you certainly don't want to be on tons of medicines. Mentation really helps us to prevent, identify, and take care of people who have dementia, which is memory impairment caused by many different things, depression, which I'll talk about. I'll talk about all of these things a little bit more, and delirium, which is an acute confusional state that can either be agitated or quiet. And mentation is affected by medications. Mentation is affected by the inability to get out of the house, and how you want to live your life also affects your mentation. So, and then finally, mobility is really, make sure that you can get where you need to go every day to do what matters to you. And so I'm going to go forward here. So mind and mentation, really, we think of as the 3 Ds. The first is dementia, the second is delirium, and the third is depression. And I'll talk about those. Dementia is cognitive impairment. Yes, Alzheimer's disease is the main cause of it, probably causes about 70% of dementias, but vitamin deficiencies like vitamin B12 deficiency can cause dementia. Thyroid disease can cause dementia. People who have small blood vessel disease in their brains because they've had diabetes or because they've had atrial fibrillation and small strokes is also a reason that people can have dementia. People with Parkinson's disease can develop dementia. And so people can have mixed dementia. You can have some Alzheimer's disease, and you may also have vascular dementia. And the slope is different. Some of the slope is very gentle and goes out for 10 years. Some of it has a steeper slope, and every person is different. Delirium often occurs with dementia. You've heard of sundowning, probably. People who have memory impairment, when the sun goes down and light is gone, or you're in a hospital room and the shades are drawn, people don't have a way to orient themselves. And if you add on top of that hearing loss and visual impairment, it can really make that worse, as it can also make dementia worse. exacerbate dementia. And so something that's agitated like sundowning is a manifestation of delirium. It happens, boom, someone can say, you've seen this when you have friends that are in the hospital and they're completely out of it. One day they were fine, the next day they're out of it, they might be fine the next day. So it has an onset, but it delays people from being discharged from the hospital often, and often prevents them from going home. It can also be a quiet delirium, which is often overlooked in a hospital when people sleep all the time, but they're not eating, they're not getting up to go to the bathroom, and they're sort of left helplessly. And I see that a lot when I'm making rounds sometimes in the hospital. It's very disturbing. And then depression. I don't need to tell anybody here, because TOS is a lifeline for a lot of us, that these past 2 years have just been so hard. We've been deprived of seeing our kids. We've been deprived of seeing our grandchildren. We've been deprived of playing bridge. We've been deprived of going to the museum. We've deprived from having lunch with people. We haven't gotten out. And on top of that, if you add all the other things that can happen with your health, there are many reasons why people have lost spouses, have lost family, and so depression is very, very prevalent in older adults. We made a connection group in our practice for people who were disconnected, and it's been one of the most joyful things that I can tell you about. And I can talk more about that later. Mobility, there's our girl. That's our BG. You know, she had all your millions of cancers, but she really just got up every day. She got her trainer. She lifted her weights. She did her planks. She showed us that you can do this stuff because you need mobility to get up and get around. Somebody put down falls and fear of falling in the waterfall chat. Yes, I'm going to talk about that more because it is falls are a major cause of death in older adults. Transferring, you can't be independent in the community unless you can get out of bed, stand up, walk to either a commode or a toilet and do your business, get yourself bathed, help yourself cook. You cannot do that unless you can transfer, or you've got somebody who's going to help you do that. You got to move to maintain function, even if you have arthritis. One of the best ways to help arthritis is to walk and to move. And then you need to have appropriate equipment sometimes to help you. And I'm only putting a few things here, but I have to show you this because this is a knobby knee. I see Jeff Katz there. This is what Jeff does for a living, helps people who have knobby knees like this. And many of us do, even starting in our 50s and 60s, or because we've had trauma from our active years. And, we treat this with Tylenol, we treat this with topical stuff, we take medications, we walk, we do exercises, we work with physical therapists. This patient of mine said, Dr. Levine, my neighbor gave me something that has worked so well for me, and I think everybody should be using this. And here it is. And I said, you can't make up this stuff. So there you go. Whatever works for you, works for you. There are straight walkers, the regular cane that you're used to seeing, but there are quad canes where you have better balance. And especially if you had a stroke on one side and you can't hold a walker, there are walkers with 4 points. There are walkers with small wheels in the front, and then there's sort of Cadillac rollator walkers. I remember once we had an event at the synagogue, and there was like a parking lot of these up by the Bima. I took a picture, and unfortunately, I lost that telephone, and along with it, parking lot of rollator walkers. But they're wonderful, and they have, brakes that you can use. But if you sit on them the wrong way, you can roll out from under you and get hurt. So you don't want a cane like this one of my patients. This is something she picked up from the woods outside her house. It's what I would call a Hemi Prong cane. And no, we want to get real cane assessment and the right cane for us. Now I want you to look at this picture. I was standing behind this patient of mine who was walking in her yard. And I want you to use the chat and tell me, this is like children's highlights for grownups. Name all the fall risks in this picture. Put it in the chat. You don't have to do this as a waterfall. What are things here that are fall risks? Slope, no railing, slanted grade, the hose, the rocks, obstacles, funky cane, uneven ground. All right, you passed the test. The grass. There's the little that little. She's got that railing that she's leaning on. You can see it's wedged between a rock and a piece of brick. So she's just headed towards disaster. Okay. Oops, having a little trouble advancing my slide here. There we go. This is on a building for senior housing in Boston. And I think they want to remind people all the time of all of the things that you just said and to be careful. But, having poor vision, having poor hearing also is leading cause of falls. And then let's talk about the next M, which is medications. I'm sure there are people here that has many bottles like this sitting on their desk. Think about if you have lousy mobility and you can't use your hand to grip, either because you've had a stroke or because you have bad arthritis. This is a real problem. And one of the problems really for older adults is the prescribing cascade. Someone put you on amlodipine, otherwise known as Norvasc, for your blood pressure. And then you got constipated and a dry mouth. So then you had to start taking Miralax and Senna maybe, and some prunes. And if your doctor is smart, your doctor will say, oh my God, let's stop the amlodipine because that's what's causing this. I got a million other blood pressure medications I can use. But that's part of what, happens with polypharmacy. The happiest part of my day, and I had one on Tuesday, I removed 11 medications from somebody's list. I sometimes remove $120 of meds from somebody's list in a sitting because this has an impact on your wallet. It has an impact on your ability to be free. It has all these medications have side effects and lead to more medications because we're treating side effects of the other one. I had a patient who had a little bit of memory impairment. She was an old Italian woman, and her granddaughter brought her espresso every day in those little silver pots that you could put on the stove. And after she had her coffee, she then took her pills, and this is where she kept them. Everybody dispenses pills in different ways that make it useful for you to take your meds. And everybody, you can get those things that are MediPlanners for a week, or you can get those ones for a month, whatever works for you. I like this one. This is Medzyme Time. This comes with cards. There's a morning card, an afternoon card, an evening card, and a dinner time card and an evening card. And what it does in the top right there, right over here, it says what the medication is and what it looks like. So this one says round red gel right there. That's Colace. A lot of people here will recognize that, but it names all of these medications. And then there's a little plastic bubble that covers it. You can push it through and the aluminum and you have your dose, and it goes by every day. And I think about this as birth control pills for older adults. So now we're going to get to what I think is really important, because you have lots of decisions that you have to make as you get older. And those decisions are really, really important. And I really think you have to think about what matters most to you. And you have to make those decisions according to that, to the ability that it's reasonable and you can, or to figure out what you need to do to help you to make those decisions that you want to make. I want to introduce a concept, since I'm talking about decision making. And there are people who are young enough in this audience who have older parents, I'm sure. And then there are some of you who are these people. The dignity of risk is all older adults, if they are not cognitively impaired, and they would have to be a certain amount of cognitively impaired to be deemed to not be able to make some decisions, have the right, if they can make these decisions, have the right to make them, even if they're crappy decisions, even if they're not something that their kids want them to do, even if it's something their spouse might not want them to do, people and even the doctors in the hospital, the patient says, I'm not going to a nursing facility for rehab. I want to go home to my house. I want to go home to my house where my cat is, where my dog is, where my neighbors are, who can bring me stuff. I don't want to do that. And people say, oh, you're not safe to go home. People have the right to go home and fall. I can't say it's a great decision sometimes, but sometimes it's the best decision. I looked on the internet for YouTube videos that might express this. And I'm not going to play this video, but this was a group of people of a certain age who went to a state park. This was a seesaw. That gigantic log was a seesaw. They lined up when it was level on both sides. I will tell you, 1 second after this picture was taken, all of them, every single one was on the ground. I'm sure some of them got very badly hurt, but that was their decision. They took a risk, and people are allowed to take those risks, even if it has bad consequences. It's really tough to be a kid of someone who takes risks that we wouldn't want them to take. So the fourth M is what matters most. And I'm going to talk about in 1 second, but I did leave out what I think is the fifth M. And I put it at the top, and it's multi-complexity. That means on top of medications, mobility, your mind, and matters most, you have heart disease, lung disease, arthritis, cancer, you name it. And all of that multi-complexity just compounds everything else and makes what matters most even more important to you. So I think it's really important to think about what matters most and make a plan. Where do you want to live? Do you want to age in place in your house? Well, what's that going to take? Who's going to have to be there with you? If you have 2 floors and your bedroom's on the top floor and you've got 12 steps up there, how are you going to get up there? You're going to have money to get a stair lift, which costs between $3,000 and $10,000. Do you want to live near your kids? Do your kids want you to move with them? Do you want to leave your friends and go to another place? What kind of a place? You could stay in your own home. You could go to a group facility. You could go to an assisted living facility. But if you do that, you need to know what assisted living is. Assisted living is not the be all and end all. You have a small apartment and you pay $7,000, $10,000 for someone to give you your pills, to help you get in the shower, to walk you down to a dining room if it's getting tougher for you. But if you need anything more than that, you got to pay for that out of pocket. Do you have that kind of ability financially? Does it mean, what does it mean if it's just an assisted living and you get to that part of the trajectory where your needs cannot be met without having around the clock care? What would happen then? You have to move again. Who are the people? And then the other kind of place is a continuing care retirement community where you can move in an independent living. That's the kind of place like Newbridge. You move into an independent living, then you might have assisted living, then there may be dementia assisted living, and then to a nursing home. So if your spouse or partner ages in a different way than you do, you can both stay there, keep your friends, have your activities, and be in the same place. But that's a premium to do that. But a lot of people like to do that. Who are the people who you're going to need to help you? If you stay, whatever you do, who needs to help? Who helps you make those decisions? Who's going to help you look for those places? What are your finances? Are you eligible for Mass Health and Medicaid? Massachusetts is a great state to age in. We have all kinds of stuff. We have congregate meal sites. There are nursing homes that are placed where there are adult day health centers that you can go through during the day while your kid is working and come back at night and there's somebody there for you. We have all kinds of stuff that's paid for. You may have a 10-room house that you can sell and use that to support the things that you want. But then I want you to think about, what are your hopes for the future? What are your hopes for the future? And what are the worries for your future? What are the hopes for your health? What are the worries for your health? I will tell you, in 35 years of asking questions like this, the hopes are people want to remain independent, living in their homes as long as they can, in the best way that they can. What are their worries? That they're not going to be able to do that, and they're going to be a burden on their family. That is probably the two biggest answers that I get. And then talking about what you wish for, your health, and at the end of life. I think these are conversations you got to have. They're just conversations. When I bring them up with people, I have to tell you, there are so many people who are relieved that somebody has asked them about this because, honestly, you just saw the trajectory. You don't think that people think about these things? Of course they think about these things. You all put it in the chat waterfall. You lose your hearing, you lose your eyesight, you lose your ability to walk. Some people, say, I'm done. And I'm, when my time is here, it's here. And I'm on that pendulum where do what I need to do to be, comfortable. And then there are other people who will say at the other end of that pendulum, I want you to do everything I can. I want to live as long as I can. I will tell you that most people would rather not live as many days and have better quality of life before that. But everything is individual, and you have to decide that for your health. And then if you do this, who's going to make sure that what you want to happen happens? That means you got to talk to your family, your partner, your kids, your friends, whoever is the person that you trust will honor your wishes about what matters most to you. That's who you have to talk to about this. Sometimes the last person you want is your kid. Sometimes it's somebody who's a close friend. And what matters most to people is most people will say, I would say 98% of the time, their families, but sometimes it's not their families. And so this is not an option. This is not an option. This is not an option. Okay? This is my mother. This is my mother who said, what happened to me? I said, Mom, you got old. She didn't make a single plan in her life. This is not an option. So what matters most for health decisions, who's going to make them for you? So this is the Massachusetts Healthcare Proxy. And right up here is you put your name. You can get this online. I just downloaded this from the web. I appoint as my healthcare agent, so-and-so. Can be your best friend, can be your rabbi, if your rabbi accepts it. It can be, I don't want to give you a lot of business, Audrey, but most people don't. Most people put down a friend or a family member and then an alternate. Some people say, I'm putting my oldest kid first and my second kid second. And it's really important to do this, but these people have to promise you that they are going to honor your wishes, that they know what your wishes are and that they honor your wishes. But the beauty of this is they can have conversations with physicians in real time. Let's say you wanted to be full code. I want cardiac resuscitation. I want to go on a ventilator, but you don't have a brain left. Lawyers can give you the form that says if I'm on a persistent vegetative state, don't do that. That's what they put in their stuff. But that can also be made in real time with your healthcare proxy. And real time allows for any eventuality because no piece of paper can allow for every eventuality. So a conversation with the person who you trust, and you can change this, is very important. I didn't give you the MOLST form, which is the pink form that many of you get from Massachusetts, where you can say, I want to be fully resuscitated. I don't want my heart pumped, but I do want to go on a tube if I have a pneumonia. I want you to take me to the hospital, but I don't want either of those other things if I need to go to the hospital. On the flip side is a thing saying, I want dialysis. I don't want dialysis. I didn't decide about dialysis. I want it for a short time. I want IVs for a short time. I don't want them. You can do that on the other side. The main one is if you keel over in your house and you don't want to be resuscitated, if that's not something that you want to have your heart, shocked, like you see on Grey's Anatomy, or to have a plastic tube that goes down your throat and it goes into your windpipe and into your lungs. You can't talk when you have that. You can't eat when you have that, with your mouth anyway. Then you need to talk to your doctor about that. and you need to talk to the people who you love about what you want and what you don't want. Because what you wanted when you talked to them originally may change. And so you need to talk to them about that. I love this site, which is called Prepare for Your Care. It was designed by a woman named Rebecca Sidori at the University of California, San Francisco. And it is a series of videos that address, how do I talk about this? This will link me into the web. It's step-by-step videos of people having these conversations, having them with their doctors, having them with their daughters saying, this is why I chose my niece and not you, honey, because of blah, blah, blah. How to have these hard conversations. And in there are, there's materials for actually to appoint a healthcare proxy, which I think is great. And so I really love Prepare for Your Care. It's totally free. You just keep going in when it says guest sign in, you can sign in. The Conversation Project was started by Ellen Goodman. She came here a few years ago for a talk and talked about having these conversations with your family about what you want. And it has this thing called Getting Started, and you get a starter guide, and it allows you to think about what you want to talk about with your family. And then you can gather your family and have these conversations. In our practice, we have for the public a website that I think is really pretty cool. I go on it a lot of times when I'm talking to patients who are not my patients, but I'm doing consult on them, called our Dementia Care Collaborative. And it's about memory care. And there's a section in it down here for patients and families, but there's also a section for healthcare providers and for people who do research. And if you go in here, there are videos that you can look at, and we have town halls about once a month. And this one coming up, which any of you can join, is Strategies to Manage Your Pain. It's going to be the next one on February 24th. But we've got them all recorded, so you can look down at all the ones down here on the bottom. You know, all of the ID people came. I think we've had 9 COVID updates during our town halls. It's on Zoom. You're on Zoom with all these people. You can't talk because they're talking. We don't want you to talk about, and I don't want anybody really to talk about their health problems here when we have a time for questions, but these are wonderful links. What mattered most to the patient who had the Hemi Prong cane? Her cat Buttons. And that's what mattered most. She took care of her mother till her mother passed away, and then she lived on her own. And these were her cats. She had 22 of them, and that was what mattered most to her, nothing else. The patient came in the hospital. She didn't want to stay. Why? Because what mattered most to her was moving her car for alternate side of the street parking. So he said to her, we're going to help you with that. Don't worry about that. Make sure your lungs are feeling better and your heart before you go out. This is where she lived. That little window up here was what mattered most to her. She had a plot. This was her plot in this community garden in the South End. And why? Because she wanted to develop murder weapons to defend herself with if she were ever accosted. No kidding. She was a wonderful cook, and she wanted to have fresh food. To close, I'm going to mention my mother because she was an example to me in many, many ways. Many people here knew her. She went to law school when she was 63. This is when she was still working. She was 85 on the steps of the Supreme Court during the arguments for the Windsor case, where it was that gay people could pass their inheritance to their domestic partner. And it was the progenitor for DOMA, for the Defense of Marriage Act, and the end to bias against gay marriage. But my mother was the person who just didn't do anything about walking and moving and getting out. And she eventually had to stop doing what she was doing, not because she didn't have the mind to do it, but because she just didn't have the stamina. And she said, what happened to me? And I said, you got older, Mom. And that's what happened. And then I'll end. That's my sister, Robin. I think she might have signed on, because I love what we put on my father's gravestone. My father was a great fan of saying, you'll muddle through. Everything you asked him, Daddy, how am I going to do this? Daddy, how am I going to do this? He said, you'll muddle through. And so you can see here at the bottom of his stone, we put down, we're muddling through. And, honestly, that's what we all do, is we muddle through. But I'm going to ask you to muddle through with what matters most to you in mind, and never lose sight of that to the end. No matter who's surrounding you, is to keep true to that. And the ability to make decisions really is, if you can say what the risks and benefits are of one choice versus another choice, apply that to yourself, those risks and benefits from one choice to another, and then make the choice. That's what decision-making capacity is, and you have agency to honor what matters to you. Once you don't have that, then you have your healthcare proxy, who you've got there to help you make some of those decisions, because they know what you think. And that's how I'm going to end with we're muddling through, because we are all muddling through.
That was excellent.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I see a lot of applause. I think this was so appreciated. We have a few minutes in which we can take some questions, and I'm going to ask Rabbi Schaefer to moderate that, to facilitate, so we can, between the two of us, make sure we're noticing when people have their hands raised. You can raise your hand or your virtual hand on the Zoom to ask a question. So let's see.
Linda would like to ask a question. Linda, can you unmute?
I'm going to give everybody some advice in the meanwhile. Don't go out and walk tonight or tomorrow.
I'm not going out. I didn't even go out last Saturday, and I wanted to because I love walking in the snow. I have cerebral palsy and aging is what it's called now, as well as nonverbal learning disorder. But when you said cognitive disorder, you have to be very careful in how you define that, because there are people who have cognitive disorders without dementia. And I don't have dementia. And they said I never will. Maybe because I read a lot and I stay as active as I can. The one thing I have problems with is I'd love to go out and walk, but I have to have somebody with me because of my cognitive disorder. I could walk into a pole without realizing it.
Well, so I don't want to talk about people's individual things in public, because that's your stuff, but you're right. I mean, cognition, when I'm using cognition, I'm talking about the ability to think, to read, make decisions, to, to be, there are things that affect the brain and the neurologic system that are not cognitive, but have people, be less than able to navigate their environments. And when I talked about cognitive, I really was talking about the ability to, you can lose the ability to, you can still learn new things, even if you have dementia. You can still enjoy things if for the people that do have dementia or memory loss. But I'm talking particularly around memory loss, not about things that affect the brain, although there are things that overlap that affect the brain, like Parkinson's disease, and do wind up with dementia. But I think the fact that you've got somebody that goes with you, that's the most important thing, so that you get out and you go and you do, because if you don't use it, you lose it. So thank you for making that distinction.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Sharon. Any other, Zita, I see you're raising a hand. You want to go ahead?
Yes, I am raising my hand. Sharon, thank you so much. I'm going to ask you a question for Beyond the End. Should we be making funeral plans? I mean,
I
I'm
think-
in my mid-80s, and I'm just wondering, should I prepay? Should I do that? What's your recommendation? Beyond dementia.
Well, I'll talk about, so I said we all have a sell-by date. There's nothing to do, we can't get out of that. And I think it's always good to plan that, because if you have an idea, it's good to execute it. Probably it'll cost more later, I don't know, but it's not, having, I was really glad that I did that with my mom, that Andy worked on that, and we helped, sort of put that in place. And I don't think it's ever too early to do that, because then you can be where you want, maybe, or something that fits with what you can work for your family. I think my sister's on, I don't know if my sister is on here, but she's the kind of person who loves to go to see my parents, and at their gravesite. And so maybe that's important to you, that it's near where your kids are or something like that. So I think it's really important to plan that. If you know that you want to be cremated, and there are many people who do, and I think that's fine, and it's very efficient, and et cetera, then you don't have to make that plan, except for to know that you're going to do that at some point. But you can specify that, and you can, the healthcare proxy is only good while you're alive, not after you've died. So too bad. Don't dump that on somebody else, but really make the decision and execute it, I would say.
Judy, I see your hand. You want to go ahead?
This is kind of a tough subject for me to contemplate. Every time I contemplate it, I try to put it out of my mind because I find it rather upsetting. But I consider that I've made a good life for myself. I'm still working and I'm still healthy and all that. When I think about a healthcare proxy and preparing for the end, it's kind of a strange decision for a single woman without children to be making. And I also don't come from a very close family. Yes, I have friends, but I really can't begin to think who I'd even ask. And, it's just very awkward for me. And, right now I don't even have an emergency contact. I can't think of whom to ask. So it's kind I'm in kind of a funny situation. And on top of all that, I have trust issues. So please, I can understand if you laugh at me, because I'm laughing at myself, but it's kind of an uncomfortable thing for me to contemplate, even though I know I should be contemplating it.
Well, I think you're not alone. I'm sure there are probably at least one other person on this Zoom that feels that way. And we did a prepare for your care, and somebody said, what if you don't have a healthcare proxy? I mean, there are some people, the rabbi can comment on this. There are some people who do appoint their priests or appoint their clergy because they have relations with them. But we have, some people have friends or, people who are close to them. Certainly doesn't have, some people would run as far away from their family as they could as a healthcare proxy. It depends who your family is, right? So that's a conversation though, and it's a conversation you could have with your doctor. It's a conversation you could have with, if there's anybody that you trust, to have it with them, because there are also people who do this professionally too. There are people who will help people in a situation like this that have nothing to gain from it. But you want to be in a I think this would be a great conversation at the synagogue level, because I think a lot of people come to synagogue because it's a place where we have community.
Yes.
It's a ready-made community. I know that Andy feels that way. This is his community. You are kind of your family, and I would never. I see totally why you say that, Judy, and it is a real issue. But there are probably people, if you think long and hard enough, even within this community, that you could at least talk to about it. And you could certainly talk to a care provider if you have that kind of trust with a with a, you know, a
Oh, yeah,
physician?
I'm crazy about my primary care physician and also her nurse practitioner. So, you have really, I've been thinking about some of the things that you've said, but they've been in the back of my mind. So all I want to do is thank you so much, Sharon, for understanding, because I was almost ashamed to even ask this question. And I am so glad to hear you tonight. And you and Andy are wonderful people. I feel so lucky to belong to Ohabei Shalom and have that as my synagogue community. And I just want to give a shout out to how much I loved Ben. He was a real character and I enjoyed him.
Thank you very much for those comments, Judy. And it's the reason why we had our connection group that we made it all the people that joined our connection group at MGH and geriatrics were all people just like you. And they had nobody and they found each other and they did. I'm not kidding. The first thing they did was they would get out the boat drive in November of 2020. And they became able to share, and that group is still going with some people coming and going. So there are ways to find connections. It's very hard in COVID without Zoom, but there are ways. And I can try and supply more information about that to the synagogue too. Actually, you made me think about it. And I also don't want to ever, I didn't comment on ageism, but it's one of the few isms that's still around. It's horrendous.
Oh, yeah.
It's horrible. It is truly one of the most horrible things, and no one acknowledges it. So anyway, so thanks for that question, Judy. I think it was a perfect question.
Thanks, Judy, and thanks, Sharon. Maybe we'll take one more question. Eva and Jean, I saw your hand is up.